Hi Narrative Fam. So today I'm going to be talking, unfortunately, about race yet again. So I was hoping that I would be releasing content that was a bit more fun or to do with med school, and I wouldn't have to breach and talk about this horrible subject, which is racism. But yet again, another innocent life has been taken, another man has been a victim of police brutality. And yet again, it's racial discrimination. So firstly, I'd like to thank all my non-black friends for being supportive, calling me, messaging me, seeing how I was dealing with the situation. And the reason why I make it a point to say non-black is because there is prejudice within other ethnicity groups towards the black community. So I just really appreciate everyone who's been checking in on me. Because as a, dark-skinned black female, there are multiple times within my life where I felt like a walking target. I'm sure most people are familiar with going to the supermarket, well, as a black person, going to the supermarket and being followed around by security. And, sometimes I feel like I can't even put on my hoodie because I might be racially profiled because I might look like a suspicious person that they're looking for. And luckily I've never had any bad altercations with the police, but I wouldn't say that I feel particularly safe with the police either. And yeah, I'm just tired of this and I'm just ready for change. But like I said, I'm going to be I didn't actually mention, I'm going to be talking about some misconceptions and thoughts about race. But before I get into that, I would like to go over just a few things that have been bothering me. The first thing is the people using BLM for clout. This is a serious issue, and you posting your provocative bikini pics, or you posting your selfies with your beat face or your DIY haircut, or your illegal fade or whatever it is, whilst a situation like this is going on, it's not even just in poor taste. I feel like if you want to post pictures, I don't have an issue with people posting their photographs. If you want to post pictures, post with chest, but don't post with chest and then hide behind the BLM movement. Not only is it very transparent, we can all see through what you're doing, that you just want to collect your lives, but it just cheapens the whole entire movement. It's extremely embarrassing. I'm extremely embarrassed that I'm seeing this, especially from the black community. It doesn't make it look serious. If you want to post about BLM, post about BLM. Make it about BLM. If you have pictures of you at a movement, at a protest, at something to do with racial discrimination, by all means post your pictures and write your caption underneath. But what I don't really need to see are people posting their photos and then doing a little 20-second thought out, 2 sentences underneath explaining why they are supporting Black Lives Matter. So that's the first thing I would say. The second one is the All Lives Matter movement. And I think people don't understand why this is disrespectful. So All Lives Matter, it's just not the case. And it should be. And all lives should matter. But at the moment, Black lives don't. And Black lives are seen to be the bottom of the bottom. Literally that little dust that you get once you finish your cornflakes, the things that no one wants, that's what Black lives are treated as. So when you say all lives matter, it kind of makes it seem like you're saying that the discrimination that black people face is not that serious, and it is. And again, it completely disrespects the whole movement, and I just want people to understand that, because I know a lot of people put that hashtag not understanding the connotations that surround it. But I just hope that people, I hope that makes it more clear. Number 3, I can't say this is all churches, but from some stuff I've seen online even before George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, even before these tragic deaths, and in the history of multiple tragic deaths over the last few years, a lot of the time when stuff like this happens, a lot of white majority churches have been keeping silent. And it's not just stuff I've seen, but it's conversations that I've had with people who go to white majority churches, white Christians who didn't know that racism was still a thing because it's something that's not talked about enough within their church. And it's extremely disheartening during this time to feel a lack of support from those sort of churches. As Christians, we believe that we are called by God, and we are called to be an example to the greater population. You know, in Matthew 5, we're described as being the salt and light of the world, and we're supposed to set this example. However, by not being well educated in race, we are not setting a good example, because what happens is a lot of people think because they're not physically abusive or not verbally abusive that they're not racist, and that's how microaggressions, or just what I call aiding and abetting the crime, as in you don't say anything when people are being racist, you just are complicit in this crime. That's how stuff like that happens, because people are not well educated. And it's sad, because I know that church can speak up well, and it's sad because I know the church is good at speaking up for discrimination. Like, a lot of white majority churches that I've been to have been great about speaking up about Christian discrimination in different countries, and it's talked about quite a lot, and we pray for those issues. However, when situations like this, you know, occur, we're just a fleeting thought. And it's just, that's not okay. This isn't, I'm not making this to rebuke people. I'm making this so that people hopefully become more aware of the situation that we're in, and let's make it more of a priority. And I think what the issue is that a lot of white Christians do not think that they're racist. Like I said before, because they aren't saying the words and they're not physically abusive. And a lot of, if I were to list some microaggressions and were to say, have you ever said this, that and the other, I think a lot of people would be surprised as to how they could have hurt people in the past. I think a lot of people are ashamed of coming forward and saying that they've said something that could be prejudiced or racist in the past. Other things that are talked about a lot in church, such as sexual immorality and addiction, those are things that are temptation. I think it's a lot easier to have a bit more of mental leeway, whereas racism, we all should know at least that racism is disgusting, it's horrible. So to come forward and say that I have been racially prejudiced, it takes a lot. It's not an easy thing to do. So I think that is one of the issues. And I'm sure that this is an issue that's probably even within, you know, the heads of the church, where they've probably said something, not realizing that it was prejudice, or it wasn't, you know, it was a bit out of line. But I don't think anyone is expecting perfection. I don't expect perfection from Christians. I don't think any Christian should expect perfection from Christian. Why? Because we all fall short of the glory of God. But what I do expect is ministers to be proactive. I expect them to teach their congregation. I expect them to acknowledge their faults in this area, and I expect them to provide resources for the congregation to learn, because a lot of people need help realizing that some things that they may have said or thought in the past is not okay, and a lot of people don't realize that. So yeah, those are just some things that I've found particularly difficult around this time. But now I'm going to continue on with thoughts and misconceptions on race. The first one being that black people don't need the support of other races to help alleviate racism. First of all, I don't like that narrative, because I think it helps, it reintroduces, well, I shouldn't say reintroduces, it increases the amount of segregation between black people and other racial groups. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's just not possible, especially for us living in first world countries, because the majority of our population is white. So that means, you know, majority white government, majority white enforcers of the law, and majority white prosecutors and defense attorneys of law. I don't know why I said of law, defense attorneys and prosecution, majority prosecution and defense attorneys are white. So because of this, we need to ensure that laws are being enforced correctly. We need to ensure that the right laws are coming in regarding race. And we need to ensure that people, especially of the majority demographic, which is the white people in these first world countries, understand racial discrimination and prejudice and why it's wrong, so that they can help us, so that when they are in certain positions, they can enforce the law correctly. And yes, I guess another issue is that there's not enough diversity within these roles, which is something I will talk about later. But it's extremely important that it's not just certain racial groups that are applying the correct rules when it comes to enforcement. And I'm not saying that every black person is, or every Asian, I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying we can't just say that, okay, one race will do it, or will be the ones to change, and no one else will, or no one else can help us change. It doesn't make sense. It's not a viable option. Additionally to that, I think it's especially important in areas where there's a higher white majority. So, for example, obviously London is a lot more multicultural than some village in Yorkshire. So it's important that black people feel safe no matter where they go. It's not just in places that are have a higher amount of cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, but also in areas where it's very limited, that they still feel safe, that they're not going to get racially profiled, stopped by the police for stop and searched for no reason. Number two, leading off what I said about laws and stuff, is definitely people think that because there are laws against hate crimes, that there's nothing else we can do. No, the law is not sufficient. And to be honest, I don't know why people think that the law would be sufficient when the law is broken all the time. People still steal, people steal and get away with it, murder and get away with it, commit fraud and get away with it. There's so many crimes that people get away with. So why did we think it would be different when it came to racial discrimination or hate crimes? It isn't, and in fact, it's probably even worse. So it's not enough for the law to protect us. People need to become educated. People, and most importantly, people's hearts need to change. Like I said before, it is important for the law to be correctly enforced, but that is not sufficient. And I think when it comes to racial discrimination, like I mentioned a little bit before about lack of diversity in these roles, there's especially a huge lack of diversity within of high-paying roles that are extremely influential. And that is linked to what we call institutionalized racism. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's racism that has been deemed normal by society or an organization. And a lot of the time when people of color talk about this, they're talking about workplace discrimination. So for example, I was talking to some friends who teach, and we're just talking about senior leadership roles, and they were explaining to me that there are schools in majority black areas or majority BAME areas that have majority or completely white higher ups. And that's an issue. It's very problematic. And the reason being is not that there are white people in those roles, but it's either solely or majority, because it results in a lot of these schools are not actually commenting or reaching out to these students about racial discrimination and what has happened. And I have multiple sources telling me this, so I'm not just making this up. And B, it results in students not having role models and not seeing role models that can achieve these high-level positions. They don't have the representation in these high-level positions, making students of color thinking that it's pretty much impossible to get to these levels. And some students are actually told this directly. I've never had an experience like this. However, I've had a couple of weird experiences with schools. One being where a teacher wanted to put me in a class for learning disabilities, and that was based off her saying that I couldn't count to, I think, 100. I didn't know my number bonds to 20, but I was lucky. My mum was very hands-on when she looked after, whilst I was growing up. So I knew my times tables pretty much. Yeah, all my times tables pretty much by the time I was like 5-ish, 6-ish. So my mum knew what she was saying wasn't true. And also being placed in lower sets, despite having higher results than other people, even though that was rectified after a while. Like I said, I can't completely attribute this to race. It could also be a classist issue, but I know that it was definitely not to do with my results, because I asked people and their results were worse than mine, so it didn't make sense whatsoever. But that's fine. Thriving anyway, going to med school anyway, so it's all good. But my point is that this type of discrimination is not just it really is institutionalized. It's not just to do with the workplace, but it feeds right into our schools and other areas. We've all heard of the cases where patients have refused to be treated by doctors of color. BBC just recently released statistics about black people in holding are twice as likely to die than white people in holding during prison. So it's a whole societal issue. And I think for especially white people who are at work, look at your workplace and ask yourself or find out how many people of color are actually in these very successful roles. And I think that's when you'll kind of start to see what the severity of the issue in the UK and in the America and these other countries. Yeah. So number 3 is linked back to what I was kind of saying before, with I didn't say the N-word. I've never been abusive to a black person. I'm not racist. So this is very, very, very not true. Like I said, you can be complicit, aiding and abetting the racism. So I think people don't understand that we can no longer be silent on this issue. This invisible fence that people thought existed doesn't exist, and if it did, it can no longer exist. It's either that you're fighting for Black Lives Matter, and it doesn't mean that you're running campaigns and you're writing books on race and marching down Downing Street or whatever, but fighting literally just could be as simple as telling someone that you're uncomfortable about the prejudiced remarks that they're making and telling them to please stop, and explaining why what they're saying is wrong. That's fighting for Black Lives Matter. It doesn't have to be this extreme MLK, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X type stance, but it does have to be something, because if you say nothing, you're not siding with BLM, you're siding with the oppressive side. And I know that sounds really harsh, but there are really only two sides of this. I was going to say it is black and white, but I don't think that's the best analogy to use. It's night and day. So, either stand in the light or be in the shadows, but you can't be doing this one foot in each camp thing anymore. It doesn't work. And I understand that people might find it uncomfortable to talk to people they're friends with and out them, but there's so many times where we've had to do other uncomfortable things. I hate public speaking. I had to do public speaking as part of my dissertation project, and I can't tell my the head of my course that I don't want to do it because I hate it. I have to do it. And I think like what I was saying in regards to Christians, I think the best way that I can think of to think about it is the same way that when sometimes you share the gospel with people and they sneer in your face, they laugh in your face, they tell you they don't believe, and it can be a bit disheartening, but you still continue with the message because you believe it to be truth. And the truth is, we know that God hates racism, and that's the same kind of mentality you should have towards a lot of POC people coming towards you and being like, I don't know why you're speaking up, because it is going to happen, because there are some POC people who do not want to see white people speaking up because they are so angry. They've allowed hatred to just penetrate their heart and they don't want to hear about it from anyone. But you know what you're doing is the right thing. So just keep on educating yourself, keep on moving. And if people say things to you, then that's okay. If they're upset, that's fine. But you know that you're doing something that's good and it's for the benefit of humanity. So keep moving with that. I'm doing a lot of this. I don't know why. But thank you for listening. This is Natasha's Narrative. I'll be making a video on giving advice as to how to combat racism, helping out with Black Lives Matter, campaigning and stuff. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening. Hopefully after this advice video, it'll be a while before I have to talk about race again. But yeah, bye.